Welcome to September, everybody. Good to see you. Thank you for joining us. Today we have, I think, a topic that a lot of folks are thinking about more and more, and has really become one of the core pillars of DevOps, this idea of shifting left. And I was just having a conversation earlier today about governance and policies, and making sure that things run the way that we hope they will, not by crossing our fingers, but by actually building out systems that do what we need. So I think this is very timely, very excited about it. I'm not going to take up a lot of time. I'm going to keep letting folks in, but what I want to do is introduce our sponsors, because they keep this running smoothly. First of all, CloudBee is very into shifting left, very into the big picture. And our second sponsor, our longest sponsor, JFrog, also very much in that space. So very happy to have them along for the ride today, very appropriate. And without any further delay, I want to introduce Raphael, who's going to be delivering the talk today.
So first of all, welcome everybody. Thank you, Steve, for the introduction. We are here today to demonstrate some of the capabilities of some of the tools that we came across during the development work that we do at Indeliant, right? So we at Indeliant, we are a Canadian company with more than 15 years of experience working with different clients, big clients, and doing mainly in the area where I participate, mainly in DevOps, cloud operations, and basically cloud migrations to the cloud, right? So let me proceed with the presentation. So first, I'm gonna just say a little bit about myself. Then we're gonna go into the CISO, the Chief Information Security Officer, what it is, what it does. Then we're gonna go over a little bit of my experience during the development of new cloud products in the enterprise. We're gonna explain why documents do not defend our systems, and we're gonna have a quick demo. So about me, I have 10 plus years of experience in software. I had the opportunity to contribute to 2 products from the inception all the way to general availability. I led one product in the enterprise from scratch all the way to the enterprise CISO approval. And I've been with Indeliant for about 3 years, in and out. Okay, so let's talk about the CISO first, right? So, first thing is, I wanted to bring this quote to attention, because as you can see, among board directors, 64% say that they're trying to change their economic architecture of the enterprise, right? And 88% say that cybersecurity is a risk. So basically what I take from this is that there's going to be a lot of emphasis in the enterprise to develop new products, and these products are going to have to be compliant. They're going to have to be approved by CISOs in all these enterprises, because they want to shift. They want to change the economic architecture of the enterprise, right? Straight from Gartner, 2022. What are the 4 pillars of an effective CISO, right? So first of all, we have functional leadership, which means that the CISO effectively drives the business, right? And how do they drive the business? They have the tendency to outperform their peers, and they have to establish the direction of the enterprise in terms of innovation and secure innovation, specifically saying, right? From the creation of the new products all the way to compliance and all of that, right? Enterprise responsiveness. So what happens is that they are the key enablers, and they are the responders for all the, how can I say, for all the events that happen in the enterprise, right? So in case there's a change in the landscape, in case there's like a disaster, a bunch of incidents happening, they are the people who are responsible for the enterprise responsiveness. Information security services. So from my experience, the CISO has a bunch of tools, right? Automation and some other tools used manually, unfortunately, in which to which they need to provide these services, right? So these services are, for example, monitoring of inventory, track of compliance in terms of policies. They have to keep track of remediation processes and how they are being completed, right? And they have to do product onboarding, product approval, reassessment, and offboarding as well, right? The fourth pillar is the scaled governance. So what they need to do is they must balance the business objectives with the risk of putting new products out there, right? So basically, from my experience, the CISO where I worked, the CISO I worked with, right? They had a very intense goal of approving as many products as they could in the shortest period of time, right? So what happens if the CISO? What happens if the CISO is flooded with incidents? And what happens? They lose all these capabilities of being functional leadership, enterprise responsiveness. They lose a bunch of these capabilities, right? So from my experience, last year, I was in the development of a product. During the approval process, guess what hit us? The Log4j incident, right? And guess what happened? We had a big delay on the whole process, on the whole approval process, because the whole CISO was, heads down, dealing with all the Log4j incidents. So adding to this, if it wasn't enough, right, that CISOs have all these problems, right, we also can see here that 58% of all SMBs, they don't even have a CISO, right? So then compliance becomes like a big challenge for these people, right? So basically, what can we automate? What can we do in order to make compliance assessments a viable option for these companies as well, right? So a little bit of the new cloud product development, the experience I had last year. The typical development process goes from product design, infrastructure design, security planning. Everything looks nice all the way here, right? People are happy, we're developing new stuff, right? However, when we start coming into the evidence assessment, remediation, sending issues back to product development, sending issues back to IAC development, aka DevOps, right? Reassessing everything, seeing if there's more remediation, or going to the approval, right? This is a lot of toil. So why is this like a lot of toil? Because a lot of this process, right, is done with paper, right? So we have, for example, a questionnaire, right, that's sent to the DevOps teams. The DevOps teams, they answer this questionnaire based on design, not on implementation, right? And these documents, they are the source of truth for all the approvals, right? Usually kept on a GitHub or maybe in another place in the internet, but it's a lot of documents. So why do we say that documents do not defend our systems, right? Because first of all, as I was talking to you about, we have the problem of the paper trail, right? So the CISO sends development teams a questionnaire to be answered based on the design of the product and the platform. The CISO then reviews the intake form, generates remediation items, which are addressed by the product team, right? The DevOps provide evidence of the compliance back to the CISO, usually in a development environment, right? And can you imagine if your Terraform state can drift from the actual infrastructure for one reason or another? Can you imagine, like, if you record the state of your system in a document, right? So we have a lot of metadata drift because as soon as you write a document, it's already out of date, right? So compliance is what actually defends our systems, right? So we have to make sure that instead of being compliant from time to time, we have to make sure that the systems are compliant all the time, right? And in order to enable DevOps teams to innovate, which is basically the main goal of all the enterprises, right, is continue innovating, right? If I develop an MVP, I put it out there, I put my infrastructure out there, right? Everything is fine, everything is working, everything is compliant, but it's an MVP, right? We soon we're gonna have to add another service, or we're gonna have to make a change to the infrastructure. And how is this change gonna be addressed early in the software development life cycle in a way that is gonna keep the system compliant all the time, right? So this is where the DevOps and the CISO, right, can benefit from policy as code, right? Basically, because the policy as code, they bring like a good security tool that fits the software development lifecycle for the DevOps, right? We have a fast feedback loop, right? Because we can write infrastructure, we can run our scans, and then we can see that everything is compliant, or if it's not compliant, we can see what we need to change, apply our Terraform again, and things like that, and automate all this process, obviously, using GitHub Actions or using any CI CD tool out there. So we also provide, the policy as code provides guardrails on security, and it's introduced early in the software development lifecycle. And what the CISO benefits from policy as code, right, is they can provide these controls to the DevOps teams and say, hey guys, these are the policies you have to follow. These policies are all in code, okay? And obviously it's in code, you can scan, and then you can have a live result of all your infrastructure, right? So you can achieve continuous compliance as well using CI/CD. And you can you also have the ability to create custom policies. So now we're gonna go to a quick demo. Let me just bring this one here. Sorry, I'm gonna have to stop sharing for a bit. If I could stop sharing. Can everybody see my screen?
Yes.
Yep.
What do you see on my screen now? Sorry, Steve.
We see your ID.
You see my ID. Perfect. It's just because Zoom is acting out. Thank you very much. Okay, so here, what we're gonna do is, I'm gonna demonstrate to you how we can use policy as code as a guidance, as a guide, right, to write infrastructure. So let me just first clear everything. I'm gonna run a Terraform. I'm gonna run a Terraform destroy to destroy everything I have there. Okay. And okay, so everything is destroyed. We don't have anything in there. So let me show you here as well. We have the management console here. Can you see my management console? Yes. Okay. So if I refresh this page, you're gonna see there's no buckets in my account, right? And then going back to the demo, this is an example of a policy which was custom developed based on the AWS Security Hub, right? So we have a bunch of queries, and we have all the identifiers of the policies. So for example, one is S3 account level public access blocks, public ACLs. So we are going to be testing everything for these policies here, right? So AWS operational best practice, S3 account level, bucket default lock enabled. Okay, Very good. But before that, I'm going to show you that we don't have anything in our fleet so far. And we don't have any policies, although Mondu comes with a bunch of default policies as soon as you create a sandbox or as soon as you create a space there, right? It comes with a bunch of pre-configured policies, which I removed just for the purposes of this demo. So going back to the IDE, what I'm gonna do now is I'm going to add this custom policy, okay, this custom policy bundle, which contains audit steps, contains remediations, okay, using Terraform, using the AWS console, using the CLI, okay, and it contains also a query. This query is what is going to be running against your AWS infrastructure via the Mondu platform, right? So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna do a Mondu policy add. I'm going to use a config file, which is for my space owner, and I'm going to be uploading all these S3 best practices policies, which are here local to me, okay? So just running the upload, you can see that I successfully uploaded this policy bundle. Now we can go back to Mondu, and if I go add policies, you're gonna see that we have a private policy here, which is the one that I just added. Here, a bunch of public policies, which Mondu provides a few of them by default. So I'm gonna click on this one. I'm going to enable. So now this policy is enabled, right? So if I go back to my policy hub, you can see that this policy here is comprised of a bunch of queries, okay? They're all enabled. And what I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna run a Mondu scan AWS. So you can see how the scan is running. We had 88% passing and 1 error, okay? The error I'm not gonna address now because it's something on me, but what is the reason why everything passed? The reason why is because we don't have anything in S3, and that's all we're testing with using this policy, right? So if you don't have any S3, everything is passing. If you don't have anything in your S3. Now, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna switch to my demo T1, which is a different branch in which I have a few changes to my Terraform. Okay. So you can see that here, what we're gonna do is we're gonna create just a basic simple bucket. Okay. Now let me run a Terraform apply here. We're making a few modifications there in the live account. Now everything was applied. If we go back to the console, we can see that we created a bucket there. We created a mondu.endalia.sample, right? You can see that objects can be public. So let's check now how this is, how compliant this is, right? So we can run another mondu scan AWS. And we can see that we still have the error, but we have 88% failing, right? And if we go back to our Mondu dashboard, if we go to our Mondu overview in the fleet, we're gonna see that we have a C score. The C score is because we had a bunch of failures, and we can check here that we failed basically all these checks, and this check is basically erroring out, but it's not going to error out in the next iteration. So now let's change to let's go to the demo T2, in which we're going to address some of those changes, right? So you can see here that I added the AWS S3 bucket public classes block, okay? And this should make some of those queries compliant, Okay, so what we're gonna do here is we're gonna do a Terraform apply auto approve again. Some of the changes are going to be added. As you can see, we added the public access block. So now we can go to the Mondu scan AWS. The scan ran again. So you can see that now we have 20% of the queries passing, right? Let's change again to our fleet, right? It's still a C. However, you can see that 2 of the queries now pass, right? We have the allow public read access compliant, and we have do not allow and do not allow public write access, both of them compliant. Okay, so because we're short on time, I am not going to iterate all the demo T1 all the way to T7. I'm gonna go all the way to T7. So let's do a checkout demo T7. Okay, and in the T7, you're gonna see that we have added a bunch of other things. So for example, the public access block is here. We enabled versioning for the buckets as well. We enabled logging for the buckets. And of course, we created a logging bucket, right? With the property log delivery right. We enabled S3 encryption. We enabled server-side encryption, obviously using the AWS KMS key. And we added the account level public access blocks. Okay, so if we run a Terraform apply auto approve again, all these changes are going to be implemented in your real infrastructure. So we added 12 different resources. 1 was destroyed, 0 were changed, and now we can run a Mondu scan AWS again. Mondu is going to scan all your infrastructure, and now you can see that we have 100% of passing queries, right? Let's go back to our Mondu dashboard, and if we refresh this page, now we have a score of A, because basically in the policy that I created, right, we have all the queries that contribute to that score, right? And we can see here that now all the queries are compliant, right? All these controls from the AWS Security Hub, they're all compliant, right? So what can we do now to demonstrate the importance of having continuous compliance enabled, right? Let's create a bucket. Let's create a bucket sample sample 1. Okay. I'm going to purposefully leave this disabled. And by the way, this is the default option, right? So let's just create the bucket. Yes. Okay. Sample 1. Okay. So now we're creating a bucket, and this bucket was created, right? So what happens if we go back to our Mondu, to the terminal, and we ask Mondu, okay, Mondu, can you please go back and scan my infrastructure again? We're going to scan the infrastructure again. And then we had 60%, 62% failing. Let's go back to our Mondu dashboard and see what happened just by creating that bucket manually, right? We are now non-compliant with all these controls, right? So basically, this demonstrates the importance of having, continuous compliance all the time running against your public infrastructure. And this also demonstrates how to use policy as code in order to guide your development. This is a simplistic demo, right? It's just it just involves the creation of a few buckets in your AWS accounts. However, we can extend this to many different kinds of policies. So if we go back to our Mondu and we go to our policy hub and we say add policies, basically these are all the policies you can add to your space and have Mondu scan for you against your live infrastructure. So you can see that we have AWS best practices. We have an AWS baseline, which was authored by Mondu. We have a bunch of CIS benchmarks for AWS. We have CIS for also operating systems like macOS, CentOS, Debian. So I encourage everybody to go to the Mondu website, register. It's currently free for everybody, so I believe it's really worth it. Giving it a try. And let me now go back to the presentation. And now I would like to open for questions and answers.
Thanks, Rafael. That was great. I love a demo, and it looks like the demo worked out start to finish. So congrats.
Thank you.
So my general question, I guess, is always like, what are the other things that you tried before you found this? And what was the first problem you were trying to solve?
Well, this came from a collaboration, right, Steve, between Indelian and Mondu, right? So we were tasked with developing a bunch of these policies, right? And having experienced the development of a product all the way through the CISO approval on a big enterprise, right? I was able to experience firsthand the pain of having to manually go to a homegrown tool, in which I needed to answer a bunch of questions. They would be manually assessed by the CISO team, and then we will need to go back to our infrastructure, make changes, take screenshots, provide the screenshots to the CISO team. They would take some time to reply, and then they were hit by Log4j, and then that generated a massive delay, right, in the approval of the product. So this is the experience I have from my product development, right? I am well aware that there's a bunch of other tools that are available in the market which assess your code only. So, for example, CodeCov can compare your Terraform code against policies for compliance. However, CodeCov doesn't test for real live infrastructure, right? And if you're using modules, for example, you need to provide input to all these modules, right? And this input that you provide via variables or whatnot, right, can make your infrastructure non-compliant, right? So we don't have a way to basically scan a code which would be the compiled quote unquote Terraform which is applied against your infrastructure. Does it answer your question, Steve?
Yep.
Yeah.
We've got another one from Vlad. What about Azure cloud support in more complex scenarios?
Well, I'm not well versed in Azure, but if there's anybody here who would like to speak more about Azure, please feel free. I really don't have enough knowledge on Azure.
Do you know if it's just supported or not? Do you know if it's supported at all?
If Azure is supported by Mondu?
Yeah.
Well, we would need to check here, but I believe yes. Let me check. Maybe not so far, but it's probably under development.
I see a bunch of Windows icons, so maybe there is something.
Yeah,
maybe it's just Windows machines.
Yes, these are for machines, exactly.
Just Windows machines.
Yes, but if it's not if it's not supported so far, it's mostly sure. I'm mostly sure it's in the roadmap.
Scott jumped in this chat and said it was supported along with Google Cloud.
Perfect. Yes.
Thanks, Scott.
Thank you, Scott.
Scott had a question before about approvals Scott, did your question get answered during the presentation?
No, thank you very much. Ralph, great presentation. You were talking earlier about the CISO needing to approve products, and I wasn't clear on that. When you were talking, was this like approving, tools that the teams need to use internally? Or is it like we're about to release a new version of the product and we need to have, the security's approval on this particular release?
Well, it's basically the creation of a whole new product, right? So using the premise, Scott, of the enterprise is trying to shift their economic model into digital in order to get more revenue and basically expand revenue, right? The experience I have is that these enterprises, they create smaller groups, right, which follows some kind of startup incubator model, right, within the enterprise. So all these smaller teams, they're seen in the enterprise as small squads, which are creating brand new products. And these brand new products are going to be offered by the enterprise. In my case, it was at IBM, right? So we were developing a brand new product, which was approved to be part of the IBM Cloud Catalog, right? So in this case, we had a product which was going to generate more revenue to IBM, and we were not the only ones. We had maybe like 15 other teams or even more developing other products, and all of them with the mission to innovate some aspect of the business, right? So
got it. So you're talking about like the waterfall process of like we're ready to go. We think we're ready to release. Now we need the CISO org to come in and validate that this thing is ready to go.
Exactly.
And then these scenarios where something like Log4j comes up, and now you've got a backlog of the whole thing is delayed weeks because we can't get it out the door. So,
absolutely.
Yeah, okay. That makes sense. Thank you for clarifying.
Oh, no problem, Scott.
We've got a question from...
Oh, here. Look at this.
There we go.
Yes, Microsoft
Nice.
Azure Foundations benchmark. Yes, so we have some support here.
I like this. I like that there's benchmarks provided by vendors. I think that's really valuable. There's a lot of folks who they want to do more in terms of compliance, and they don't really know where to start. And the idea of building out an entire catalog just seems like a giant project. So being able to take something from Microsoft or Google and just apply it based on good practices is pretty fantastic. Andre's got a question. Would one of the first steps in getting started be for the CISO to define the security policies?
Yes, absolutely. That would be perfect. So the CISO would have to define all the security policies, right? In which case they can and should use some of the predefined policies that we can see here, which are public, right? And for example, in my case at IBM, we had a main policy document that we needed to follow, which is the ITSS, right? In that case, CISOs can get all these policies which are not present in the public and publicly known benchmarks, and they can implement their own queries. So if I assume you can still see my screen. So if we go here to the policies that we created, right? Let's take a look at the logging, right? So we can see that this is a severity of 30. The description tells what the query is about, right? What the control is about. Sorry for saying query all the time, but what the control is about. In order to check if you're compliant, you can run an execution of this, for example. So I can come here and say mondo execute -taws, and I can say, okay, can you run this query? What is the result that you get, right? So we're running this query. You can see that we found a bucket, right, which has logging not defined, right? So we can come here and say, because we are trying to find the ones that have logging.length equals to 0, right? But if we change this query and we put different than 0 and we run the query again, we're gonna find the other 2 buckets which are compliant, right? So you can see here that the logging for this bucket has a target bucket, has a target prefix, right? And the same thing for, sorry, for the sample bucket, which is the bucket that would hold, you know, the data, right? We have the logging and we have the prefix, and also for the logging bucket, we also have the target buckets and the prefix. So this is just a little demonstration of how this query language can help you, you know, investigate your live infrastructure and get straight to the point where you're failing a policy. Does this answer the question?
Sounds
It
like
does,
it.
yes. Thank you.
All right.
How do you find the documentation? Like, is there documentation for creating policies?
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
any guidance around like how to do that well?
Yes, absolutely. So let me just find here. So if we go to Mondu Docs, so here's the documentation. You're gonna find everything in the Mondu platform. Okay, I have a few links at the end of the presentation, which I'm gonna share with you, Steve, and you feel free to forward to all the participants here today. So we have a bunch of get started, and we have references with the CLI commands, the MQL, which is the Mondu query language, resources. So you can see that we have a bunch of AWS resources, right? So all these objects, they have a spec, right? And obviously they have a type, they have a spec, which you can use to query, basically. Write queries using these properties and establishing conditions for the query to return to you a false or a positive or a negative. Okay, all these links are in the presentation, and I'm gonna share with everybody.
One more for me. What about community? Like, where do people who are doing this hang out, and how do you connect to other people who are
Absolutely.
spend all their time in Mondu?
Okay, so let me bring it here. So here we have a few links. So if you'd like, please go to the mondu.link/Slack. So that's the Mondu Slack community. I am a part of that. I participate there every day. You can go and sign up for Mondu. As I said, it's currently free. Okay, and you can, you know, test the waters, run scans against your accounts. They have a bunch of other stuff there. So for example, they have AWS integrations in which they use a different kind of scanning method, right? Because right now, for demo purposes, I'm just doing scanning from my local environment, right? So from coming from my local machine, hitting the Mondu API, Mondu hitting my infrastructure, right? But they provide a bunch of other integrations which are, you know, much more production ready, obviously. Let's go here.
Awesome.
For example, these are just a few of the integrations that they have available. So the Amazon AWS integration, the workstation, which is the one I used, right, to run the scans. They have also Kubernetes integrations, right? And a bunch of other stuff here. So I recommend everybody go there. It's really cool.
All right, we'll make sure we get these posted, and interested to see where this goes. This was news to me. I've never seen, I mean, I've seen some compliance frameworks, but this seems like a really interesting approach. Last chance for anyone to get squeeze a question in, but before we sign off, I want to say thanks very much, Raphael. This was great. I really appreciate the time and the combo of slides and a demo. I feel like it's been a while since we saw a demo, so that was great.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you very much for the opportunity. And obviously, thanks to Indeliant for being a sponsor for me for this presentation, and also Mondu, right?